So for the last few weeks, I've been testing out the latest in the starter deck series in the One Piece card game, the Three Captains. And today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this ultimate deck, which leader is the best out of all three, which cards you should look out for in the deck, and then my thoughts overall. Of course, make sure to subscribe because I already made decks for these guys, each leader, along with some featured gameplay in each of them. Those videos will follow this, but make sure to follow me on twitch.tv/aandroidd if you want to see live gameplay. First, let's go through some bullet points. This is actually a 50 card technically ready-made deck. I call it ultimate deck because, well, it's a pretty decent deck compared to any other starter deck that has come out. Every card is actually foil, which is pretty nuts. Not the first time they've done it in a Bandai card game, but it's still pretty cool. It does release on November 10th for 30 bucks. Hopefully, although it does release on the 10th, it won't be legal for that Pasadena event that's right after it, which is a bummer, but makes sense. We'll probably be seeing this in December or any of the following events afterwards. I do want to preface that the fact we're in a weird format, and if you're like me in the US /NA, well, we have a restriction list. We have a ban and restriction list with Boat and Radical Beam and the 9th cost Whitebeard, which all of those actually do affect these leaders. We're also very close to the release of OPO5, with those restriction lists along with OPO5 probably going to stay where that restriction list is, whether Whitebeard gets touched again or not. It's going to be a little weird to be testing that, of course, on the sim, since it's not updated for that just yet, and as well as the format after it gets releases before OPO5. Anyway, the other part of this is that you actually do get two reprints, one in the 1-cost Nami Searcher, and then one in the 3-cost Zoro Rush card. Both of these are actually play sets. You get 4 of each, which is pretty cool. You can probably assume every other SR or every other SR in general is going to be 2 copies of each. You're going to have to pick up 2 of those, 2 of the decks in case you wanted something like the Law Kid or something like that. And all the other ones should be play sets, except for one of the commons, I believe. You can find the complete list on the One Piece card game website as well. With all of that in mind, let's talk about the leaders. First up, in my opinion, is the best leader, which is Law. Law does have a few things going for him. If you like removal and bodies on board, you'll like Law. It's similar to Red-Green Law in that way, where you have to get the sequencing right and get the maximum amount of value out of the leader, but you basically set the pace as this leader. There's constant removal, there's constant threats, there's constant bodies just swinging at you. All of these things kind of add up to be a very good tempo leader. You can pair your leader ability with stuff like Gordon, Roundtable, and Marco, and pretty much always go for 2 for 1 for removal and playing a body on board if you play it right. You'll also want to lean on things like Beppo to continue your leader ability and as well as your Dawn minus effects. I think he's playable before OPO5, but there are a few things that actually does help him. Things like the 5-cost Kid and as well as Gamma Knife are pretty good examples of that. Second in line is going to be that Luffy. So Luffy is a 6k leader with 3 life, which automatically makes him a worse Whitebeard. Whitebeard basically allows himself to draw 2 every single turn, along with using his life as a resource. And being a 6k leader is like, people are kind of used to it now by fighting Whitebeard over and over again in tournament. It's actually interesting because with the restriction list, he knocks him down, really knocks them down quite a bit in this upcoming weird before OPO5 format. And even in OPO5, Radical Beam as well as Whitebeard are played in Luffy, and it makes sense, right? You ramp up until 8 Dawn, you use the leader effect, and then you go into the 9-cost Whitebeard. With those restrictions, it's kind of in between, at least for me, in my opinion. The power level for this leader is between himself and as well as Kid. His activate main is a little cool, it's kind of different, where if you have 0 Dawn or if you have 8 or more Dawn, you get to add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck as active. You basically ramp 1, and this kind of leads you to be playing ramp cards throughout the entire game, along with getting to that 8-cost Dawn or 8 Dawn in order to get to 9 and then use that from there. Things like Queen, things like other things that are higher cost, or you have to use a minus Don effect, like the 7-cost kid that is included with this, is a lot easier to play because you just automatically get that Don on face with your leader. With Whitebeard being restricted and only being able to play one, you can't really rely on that, which means you have to rely or lean on things like the 9-cost Kaido or even Shanks, which doesn't feel as good or is as good in general. Overall, I enjoy him a lot. I found a pretty cool build with him that feels comfortable. It took a while, especially in this, again, pre-OPL5 format, but I like it, and I don't think it's going to make waves too much until OPL5. In OPL5, we have cards like Zoro Juru that automatically make you ramp since you have 3 or less life, and is really good on curve in general. The new 10-cost Luffy is also really good because that's where the 0 Dawn comes from. I think the new purple Luffy might play a little bit better, but this is really cool because you are ramping to something that has a really crazy effect. If you come from Dragon Ball, it's Super Shenron. You get two turns in a row, which is just nuts. Although you lose all your Don, basically what happens is that you wipe your Don with the 10-cost Luffy. You use the leader effect to go to 1. You use the 10-cost Luffy effect to go to 2. You pass the turn. You go to 4 Don. You go to 5 with the Luffy, so on and so forth. And as long as you keep that there, you can keep ramping and get back to where you need to be. Moving on, lastly is Kid. And I don't think he's particularly the worst, but I also think he's sort of average. I think he's cool. I think he offers a different playstyle than the other 2 leaders, and I think that's cool. Personally, I think he is a mid-range deck that, again, offers a different experience. You manage Dawn differently from Law, and you get that power buff differently from Luffy. Being at 5 also pretty much makes you or allows you to draw 2. You really do want to be at 3 or less in order to get around that leader effect where you are a 4K leader when attacking. There really aren't any standout cards for Kid in general for me, at least for me. I think the new 5-cost Kid from the OPL5 set does help this quite a lot because you are going to be minusing Dawn pretty much every turn to swing in order to get that boost. Finally, let's talk about some cards you should look out for out of this deck. I think the best cards to pick up in singles or in general are going to be those reprints I mentioned earlier with Nami and as well as Zoro, along with the super rare Luffy, Law, and Kid. Not surprisingly, they fit with the theme of the deck being pretty decent, but I think they all provide something good in generic. I really wish that super rare Luffy was a 9-cost because it will help a ton on curve and it'll help with that commitment to it, allowing a guard point or something else like that assumably afterwards, sort of like the 9-cost Whitebeard. But committing to it basically places your opponent in a situation they have to answer if they play multiple blockers. Basically you say, hey, I'm going to swing with this, you can block or you can take it. But sometimes people end up blocking it and then you just pop something else. The other cool part of that is that you don't have to be swinging with Luffy. You can swing with anything else and your turn effect with Luffy will proc off any point anyway. Law is such a good ad for purple, becoming just a mini e-show to punish those who don't counter early and just have a high hand total, and pretty much rewarding you to be aggressive, because earlier on, like before 4 Dawn, if you are swinging a lot or hard, then you're going to be able to use this effect pretty easily because they're going to be taking life. This is also good just generically, right? Like just against Whitebeard, like anybody who's playing purple can do it, you know, green, purple for Dolphy, things like that, or even Magellan. Magellan gets great boost from this as well. Speaking of, you know, Kid also provides very interesting support for purple and Magellan, where, you know, they're doing their best impression of Luffy or Whitebeard, being an 8K is also perfect to go against both of them as well. The remaining cards are pretty much in archetype. There's nothing to write home about for those, so it's not really much to say. I think some honorable mentions is going to be that Gene Bart, and you know, going first on 5 Dawn helps you ramp up pretty well on that. And Wire has this very niche draw cycle effect for those who are going to be using those Dawn minus effects in any of those purple decks. Honestly, I could probably talk about these cards all day, but I think that's all you really need to know. Please make sure to subscribe again, because I will be breaking down each leader and as well as my deck for each of them, along with some gameplay and also testing on Twitch.